Our vision, our whole purpose is to facilitate access to capital, education, to help address the wealth gap, primarily focusing on the underserved and underbanked members of our community.
That was Al London, Community Impact Director and Senior Vice President at Old National Bank, talking about the impact and legacy of Indiana's first ever minority deposit institution, Generations Community Bank. And this is IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. So, Al, Happy New Year and welcome to the 42nd episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman, and our first of 2025. I'm super excited to have you here and to have this conversation with you today. But before we kick us off, will you please tell our listeners a bit about you, your educational and professional background, and any other factors that have led to you becoming the Community Impact Director and Senior Vice President at Old National Bank?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you, Angela. I'm happy to be here. I guess there's a little bit of a pressure being the first in 2025.
That's right.
So, but no, a little bit about Al London. I'm originally from Georgia. I moved to Indianapolis in 1992. I attended Indiana Wesleyan. I recently completed a 28-year career with JP Morgan Chase before moving over to Old National Bank. And my history in banking has landed me to the opportunity I'm at today with Old National. During that 28-year career with Chase, I served in several different roles, but perhaps the most common role that I got my most excitement was anytime I got a chance to engage with the community. So that's what's got me here.
Since beginning this podcast, I focused on issues that relate to women and particularly diverse women in the business community because I know that challenge, right? I've lived that experience. But I also appreciate that beyond women often having the most challenges in retention and promotion and advancement in business, diverse men have their own set of challenges. And I would say also, particularly here in the Indiana business community, because, you know, the Midwest sometimes gets a kind of bad rap about its diversity and how many opportunities or the availability of opportunities for diverse folks. So I want to know, as you talk about this long career, almost 30-year career in banking, you know, what do you believe are some of the unique or specific challenges that are faced by diverse men in business, not just in Indiana, but probably across the country? And what can our employers and community leaders do to address some of these issues, such that diverse men in particular feel more included and accepted in executive leadership positions and for advancement opportunities?
I think speaking as a diverse individual, and I don't speak on behalf of all Black men, but I would just say in my conversations over the years, I believe there's still that pressure to perform. Right? There's that extra pressure. We've all heard it in the Black community. We have to double cross our T's, double dot our I's, work twice as hard to get half the recognition. Yeah. So that pressure of just having the sense of belonging still exists. When you think about what can corporate America do to address that, specifically here in Indiana and Midwest, be honest about it. Acknowledge that there is still a shortage of representation. Understand the pressure that puts on for those that you do have in those roles to perform, and be willing to have an open and honest conversation without being defensive about it. It's not about, did you do something wrong? It's about, what are we going to do to fix the problem today? I think too often when we start talking about the challenges of being diverse, oftentimes I view those in the non-diverse community sometimes take the offense as if though we are approaching them that they did something wrong. And sometimes it's not that. It could be very well simple oversight. But be open to the conversation, be open to my experiences, and don't limit it to, or you're making excuses, or I made it, why can't others make it? You got to have an opportunity. We need more access to these opportunities. I was in a conversation the other day with another professional Black male, and he was talking about part of his journey is shedding sunlight in other minorities' careers. And that's what we need. We need more leaders willing to shed some sunlight, give your diverse talent an opportunity to succeed or fail. But either way, give them that opportunity to perform. And I'm going to make this bold statement. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised what you'll get when you give people the right opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. I appreciate that because I certainly feel like being a woman in a very niche practice, legal industry, there is not enough folks, diverse and non-diverse, to be very frank about it, who give diverse people opportunities and show them that they're confident and it's okay to fail. Everybody gets opportunities to fail. There is an extreme amount of pressure on diverse business professionals to not just show up and be excellent, but to never fail. And the reality is there's no non-diverse individual you'll speak to that has gained any level of affluence or influence that has not failed. Failure's part of the journey. So I really appreciate that, because I think that is critical and extremely important, not just for our non-diverse community to understand and appreciate, but also diverse business professionals. I think oftentimes we put way too much pressure on ourselves, and it's challenging. And you and I are getting to the age and vintage where, that stuff begins to show itself.
Absolutely. I think about, to your point, that pressure, speaking of myself, I'm the first in my family to be in corporate America. I'm the first in my family to be in senior leadership. So think about that pressure. The pressure of your family is proud of you. You don't want to let them down. Then oftentimes you're the only one in the room. There's pressure there. So to your point, that pressure is real. I also would say we need to make sure that we change this. Don't be afraid to call your culture out for what it is within your company. If your culture needs to change, make the change. Don't allow slogans to become your culture. Where, DE&I, we've heard that a lot since George Floyd, right? So I would just challenge us to continue to not let that be a slogan, but actually become a part of our DNA.
So a lot of what you're talking about is having emotional intelligence. We hear a lot about EQ, having empathy for someone else's position and appreciating that we're both here today, but the path you walked and the path that I walked may be very different. So I want to ask you about you being in a executive position in banking, of all the things. I don't know if the perception is there's not anybody more stiff than lawyers than bankers, right? So, tell me about you being able to demonstrate and express your own authenticity within your corporate culture, but still be true to who you are, to the people who brought you up, to the people in Georgia, to the people who have high expectations, your family for you today. And how are you able to show or demonstrate your authenticity in a way that also allows the people around you in your corporate culture to feel comfortable that they too can show their authenticity and be valued and respected?
Along my career journey, when I've performed the best is when I've had leaders that instill confidence in me to be Al London. It's okay to be yourself. Those same leaders often also stood by me when I had moments of failure, because you learn more during your moments of failure than any other time in your career. At least it's true for my career. And what I've learned over my career journey is, and I had a good friend to remind me of this, especially when I made a transition from going from Chase to Old National, was, Al, don't worry about being a cultural fit. Go over and be a cultural add. So that phrase, and I often have to reflect on that phrase often, is don't worry about being a cultural fit, be a cultural add. And that comment resonates with me to allow me and remind me to be Al London, because they hired Al London, right? That's who they want. So I would just say to any of the listeners today, remember, your employer hired you, right? Be you. It is okay to be you. Now, I do believe there's moments where you have to earn the right to come in to be your full authentic self. I don't think I wouldn't suggest walking through the door on day one, kicking the door down, like, hey, I'm Al, take me for who I am. I think it has to go both ways. It's a relationship. Earn the right to share a little bit more about you as you learn more about the culture, but don't be overly concerned about being a cultural fit, be a cultural add.
That's really powerful. I've never heard that phrase. I like it a lot, because the reality is, if you're just kind of fitting in the culture, then what are you adding? What are you contributing? We talk about, especially women business professionals talk a lot about, there's not a seat at the table, pull up a seat, right? And that's basically what you're talking about. Add to the culture, bring your flavor of authenticity, but also in the framework of demonstrating excellence, right? And that's important, because you just said you kind of have to earn the right to, and I think that's right. I think oftentimes some of our younger leaders hear us us as more senior leaders speaking about authenticity, and they believe you can be that on day one. And I don't know that that's always the case. You earn the opportunity and the freedom to be more and more authentic as you demonstrate excellence and your addition and value to your corporate culture.
Absolutely. One time I had a mentor share to me and says, Al, I want you to understand, when you've earned the right to be your authentic self, and you've earned that through your performance. She shared with me, she said, here's a small demonstration to remind you of when you know you've earned it. She's like, day one, you walk through your company door with blue hair, using blue hair as an example. No offense to anyone that has blue hair. But if you walk through the doors today with blue hair, they're going to like, who are you? What are you doing? You know, as a black male, you're walking through the doors with blue hair. But let's say a few years down the road, Al London has come in and performed. He's shown himself, to your point, showed up in excellence, right? Now walking through the doors with blue hair, they go, wow, Al, what cause are you representing? What message are you trying to convey? So in other words, I've earned the right to be my authentic self. I've earned the right to command the attention and the respect of those around me because I'm also performing.
Yeah, that's excellent. I like that so much. And I think we often don't focus on that piece of it as much as we should, right? So you mentioned not just having a slogan. You know, DE&I during the George Floyd period, a lot of people had slogans. They bought into everybody needs to have a DE&I statement. Everybody needs to have a DE&I director. And clearly it seems like we're at a time now where a lot of that is getting rolled back, right? And getting reversed. And that's a whole issue in and of itself. But I kind of take the stance that, and probably for you and I and many people like us, DE&I is never a slogan because we live it every day, right? Like it is part of my fabric and my being. And I believe personally that I don't care what you call it or what name you put on it or what policy it is. It never goes out of style doing right by people. For me, it's a function of right and wrong. Since I was back at Lilly 1,000 years ago, we've been making the business case for diversity or equity or inclusion or whatever the case may be. But for me, it truly is an issue of right and wrong. And sometimes being right, doing right, demonstrating right is not comfortable. And I think to your point earlier, oftentimes we shy away from some of these practices or procedures or policies because it gets uncomfortable. I think uncomfortability is not a bad thing. A lot of change happens during uncomfortable times. A lot of progress happens when things get a little uncomfortable. And so I want to know from you, given your experience in banking, how necessary do you believe discomfort is in trying to truly effectuate positive change in a culture, in an environment, in a corporate setting, especially around equity and inclusion and making the culture more fair for everybody involved? I personally, again, believe discomfort just kind of is part of the game, but I want to know your thoughts on that.
To your point, when discomfort arises, it usually brings about a change. But what I also like to remind folks is we can't just rest in being uncomfortable, because I don't know about you, Angela, but I don't wake up every morning and I perform my best when I'm uncomfortable. I perform my best when I am comfortable. So I say to folks is doing what is right. We got to get away from thinking that's uncomfortable. Doing what's right is right. When did right become wrong? Treating people fair, doing what is right by your fellow man, your fellow woman. When did that become so wrong? And I think that's where I get stuck in today's vernacular when it comes around DE&I. It's like, why is that wrong? Why is it wrong when we're simply just talking about treat your fellow man and woman, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their gender, treat them fairly, give them an opportunity. Because we all know when we have a diverse workforce, it's better for the company, it's better for the clients, and it's better for the employees. There's hundreds of stats out there that says that. So I often get a little bit stumped when I see all the rhetoric around DE&I, why it's been, if I could say, dare say, been attacked, when in its most beautiful, harmonious way, is designed to uplift us all. So I'm sorry, I get a little lost with that approach of what I'm hearing today in the media.
Yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, when your fellow man, and I like that, your fellow man, your fellow woman's doing better, we all should be doing better. When I get a win in an environment on the team, everybody wins, right? Why is that a bad thing? And I think our culture, our society has made us so competitive and so adversarial that there is a lot of belief that I can't win unless you fail, or I can't win unless you lose. And the truth is, there's enough pie, there's enough money, there's enough power, influence, all the things, beautiful homes, all the things for everyone to do well.
For everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I think we just all have to acknowledge that we come from different advantages or disadvantages. And that is okay. That's life. But it's not wrong to try to balance that out. Even in your best effort to balance it out, it's not going to be balanced, right? Like everyone's not going to have the same size home. Not everyone needs the same size home. Not everybody needs the same position. Not everyone can handle the same type of responsibilities. But everyone deserves an opportunity to be successful in their own right and to have a good living and to do for their families. I've not met one man, whether it's a Black individual, white individual, Hispanic individual, one man that I've ever sat down with. And when we get to know each other, we all realize we have the same common goal. We want to provide for our families. We want to be good citizens. And we just want a good life. And we want to be successful. I can't find no one on the streets that will deny that.
Right. I don't know those people. I don't know anybody who's like, I'm just trying to live the worst life possible.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to do good for my kids. And if we can get back to that kind of framework where you see people in that light, to me, it becomes so easy. Now it's time for a break.
Get caught up on the state's top business news every business day with the Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand podcast. Available now at InsideIndianaBusiness.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back with Al London, Community Impact Director and Senior Vice President at Old National Bank, on this 42nd episode of the Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. So I want to turn the vantage point a bit to banking and talk a little more about some of your experiences over this long, esteemed and established career you've had in banking. And I want to talk about some of the challenges that diverse people have had with banking and lending organizations. Particularly, we know that diverse folks, Black and brown communities, women have had challenges historically in getting lending, getting funding. One of the very first episodes I did on this show was speaking to two female entrepreneurs and business owners, and that was just a few years ago, and they were still talking about the challenges in getting true bank funding for their businesses. Both are still in business, they're thriving, but we appreciate that many diverse and women entrepreneurs often have to bootstrap the lending, the funding of their businesses because they're unable to get official bank loans or whatever. And maybe that's associated with credit. Maybe that's associated with lack of credit, all the things. But no question that we know that there have also been discriminatory practices in banking that have led to some of those outcomes. So I want to know, over the course of your long, almost 3-decade career in banking, how have you seen some of the policies or practices for trying to support more diverse business owners, women business owners, with regard to bank lending, bank funding? I've seen banks, particularly these days, getting very creative in how they go about that. So tell us some of the things that you've learned or seen, particularly being from the inside.
I think from the banking industry, you've seen it, to your point, you've seen a lot of banks reach across the aisle in a much more effective way than I would say in previous years, whether that be changing the landscape of their leadership team by adding more diverse individuals, men and women at the leadership level. So now you have a voice that represent the community that you're serving. From products, right now I'm at Old National Bank. When I think about the small business empowerment program that's led by Roland Shelton, a Black male out of Evansville, Indiana, who locally have a young man on the floor serving the Indianapolis community, Leo Lopez. When I think about the impact they're making there with that particular program, when I think about the Old National Down Payment Assistance Program, how we're helping folks get into homes. And then just the sheer location of different banks that you're seeing are opening, trying to get more proximate to the communities. I've seen that landscape start to change. But one thing I will say to you, Angela, in my transition, as you know, we're launching a new bank here in our state here soon. And one of the things I want to do is getting proximate with the people in the community. I went out and sought out different Black business owners, specifically Black business owners, and asked them, what do you want in a bank? And I said, let's take credit off the table because, everyone's going to say, hey, give me a loan. But let's take credit off the table. What do you really want from a bank? And the resounding message I kept getting was a relationship. I want a relationship, Al. I want my banker to know me by my name. I want my banker to understand my business. I can accept being declined by a loan if I understand the reasons why. I can accept an approval, but I need someone to understand me and my business owners. So I often say it's not exclusively about the declines, it's about the experience. And I think in the minority communities, we need more access to knowledge, to how to go about getting that business loan. I often tell my clients, before you walk through the doors of the bank asking for a loan, you should have probably been in that bank 6 months prior, sitting down with that banker and say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for a loan. My business is getting ready to grow. I have some projections. Can we sit down and let's do a consultation through those numbers? And let's talk and tell me what you're going to need from me. What are you going to need to see in my numbers to get me closer to a yes, if not the yes, right? Because it still has to be underwritten. They can't tell you yes up front. Still got to go through their process. But what do you need to see? What are the criteria? And I often see those that's not in the minority communities come into the bank in my 30 years in banking. I often had clients walk in my bank, sit in my desk or sit at one of my bankers' desks and say, Al, here's what I'm thinking about doing next year. So they're planning and they're getting the answers to the test, if you will, before they come in to submit. So I want to encourage every minority business owners, before you go into a bank, applying for a loan, seek out a banker, sit down and have that conversation. And then also bring your CPA to the table. Because it could be, the client could be the way your taxes are being performed. I'm getting too much into details now, but the most important thing is sit down and have that conversation.
That's really, really excellent advice and feedback. It's basically like what we do for anything else. It's mentoring, but for banking. Tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I need to be doing. Tell me what I can be doing to improve my opportunity to be successful at the outcome and the outset. And we all do that when we're looking for a job, when we're looking to start a new opportunity. But I can tell you, I've never really thought about doing that from a banking perspective. But certainly, and partly that's because I've never been an entrepreneur, right? But certainly if you are, that is fantastic advice to consider. Plan ahead. Think about what you want to have happen in a year or a year and a half and start planning and trying to get your ducks in a row. So when you're ready to make that move, it works out how you want it to work out.
Even if you're not sure what the future is, sit down and talk with your banker. Say, hey, can we talk about my business? Here's what I'm projecting in 2025. Here's where I want to be in 26. I may need a loan at some point. What are you guys going to look at? And begin to have the answers to the test, if you will, if I can call it that. Yeah. Have the answers to the test before you walk in with your paperwork and your excitement about your business only to be told no. Set yourself up for success.
Another train of thought I had around banking is this disparate wealth gap that we know exists between white Americans and diverse communities. In fact, I just read a 2024 Reuters article that said the wealth of white families was up 28% since 2019. Hispanic households was up 20% higher since 2019, and Black families was 1.5% lower, such that Black households are actually doing worse. They're in worse financial position in 2024 and 2025 than they were before the pandemic. That is astounding to me. I had never heard that, and that puts things in pretty good perspective. So I want to ask you about what Old National specifically is doing to address the wealth gap. And in that vein, I want you to tell us about this new Minority Depository Institution, Generations Community Bank. I want you to give us some education on what is a MDI, because I had never heard of that. What's your role in the new bank? And how can this new bank specifically help diverse people in our community begin to build and retain that generational wealth to reduce this disparate wealth gap that clearly is upon us in 2024 and 2025?
Let me start off by saying I have been thoroughly impressed, and I very much appreciate the leadership at Old National Bank. When you think about Jim Ryan, the CEO, Rafael Sanchez, who we all know here in our community, not the TV station, right? Rafael Sanchez, the actual banker, and Roland Shelton, and the list can go on and on. I can name several folks. I really think Old National has a great culture, and what I've seen in the time that I've been on board here, close to that leadership team, I love what they're doing. Again, I mentioned earlier the empowerment program they have for small business owners, the down payment assistance, what they're doing. Then I think about Andrea McGordon and her team here, the community impact team, what they're doing across our city in terms of providing financial empowerment series, educating folks on how to become stronger with their finances.
I see you and Musa out all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
they're
education is a real thing.
Absolutely. They're all over the city, and I love the work that her and Musa are doing. But when I think about Generations Community Bank, now I get real excited about this one because this, to me, is innovative. To our knowledge, we've never heard of an existing bank launching a new bank that will not be a competitor, but more of a partner, a life partner. Generations Community Bank will be an MDI, Minority Deposit Institution. Minority Deposit Institution, across the United States, there are 150, based on my last count. There are 150 MDIs in banking, designated banks. We hopefully will be 151 and the first in the state of Indiana. To be an MDI, you either have to be minority owned or 51% of your board have to be minority led. So we are qualifying today. We filed our bank application back in November, and we're going under the order of 51% of our board will be minorities. So our vision, our whole purpose is to facilitate access to capital, education, to help address the wealth gap, primarily focusing on the underserved and underbanked members of our community. A stat that I use is across the United States, and it's no difference here in Indianapolis, that 25% of the population qualifies under the underserved or underbanked population. So if you just look at the area of 1 million folks here in our residency, that's over 250,000 people that need Generations Community Bank. And the purpose of our bank, again, is to help facilitate education, take those clients one by one, help them reach their financial goal, whether that be open up their depository relationship for the first time, getting them out of the check cashing places where they're giving away 20, 30% of their payroll just to cash their check, or helping them get prepared to be a first-time homeowner, or helping the entrepreneurs that we've talked about here getting their paperwork in order to get to a yes for access to capital. Also partnering with our CDFIs, our partners in the CDFI community, helping them grant more access to our small business owners, right? Maybe we can partner with them and get more access to capital. So the bank hopefully will open later this year. If everything goes well, we still have to get regulatory approval, but we're targeting the opening later this year. I can't wait till the doors open. I can't wait to see the impact we're going to make in our community. We're going to open up with 2 locations, one on the near north-south side, and hopefully one centrally located here. We're still trying to finalize our sites, but I can tell you every day I wake up living and breathing, getting this bank launched. My role in the bank will be the CEO. I've already started to build my team, and I will tell you one of the things that I love about the team that I'm building thus far is that everyone has a strong passion about this community. Indianapolis welcomed me back in 1992, so this is home now for me. And I'm excited to be a part of history by establishing what will be known as the first MDI. I do want to just put a little quotation there, though. I do want to give a shout out to, I believe it was Dr. Frank Lloyd back in the 1980s. And I can't remember who all the other members of his team. I know they started a bank. I think it was Midwest Bank back in the early 80s, and I think it survived maybe 2 or 3 years. But we will be the first MDI because that designation didn't exist. by the federal government back in the 80s. So more to come about Generations Community Bank, but we plan to make a difference here in our community.
I am so excited about that. Number one, that you're going to be the main leader because I've gotten to know you very well. I'm excited about that. But to also see Indiana really branching out and doing something that has never been done in this state, to recognize that our communities, particularly our diverse communities, need help. They need help in just maintaining workable wages and being able to get that American dream that we all have, that we just discussed, everybody wants. And if there is an opportunity to provide a banking resource that can educate and empower and uplift our communities in ways that oftentimes our standard banks just haven't either had the resources or the passion or the care to do, then that is phenomenal. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for our community because I think it will be an amazing opportunity for a lot of the underserved and underbanked, as you said, to, have a more traditional banking path and be able to start establishing the credit, the resources, the savings account that you need to get to home ownership and entrepreneurship and all the things. So that is super phenomenal. I want to ask you, because you and I were talking as we prepared to have this conversation about your role. We understand that you're going to be the CEO, Mr. Man. We get it. Okay. You're going to be running things when it opens. But right now, you're doing all the things. So I want you to tell folks like what you're involved in now, because they're never going to appreciate that the Mr. CEO that they're going to see in a few months, it's all dressed, looking all good, is actually out here doing all the things with regard to getting this bank established, getting it built, getting it funded, getting it ready to actually open the doors to the community. So while we will come and celebrate you when the doors open, tell us what you're doing now to get the bank established and open for the community.
Angela, I will tell you, when I said yes for this opportunity, and my dear friend Rafael Sanchez, buddy, just know payback is coming.
You said he's a banker, but he was a lawyer first. So
hey, you know what?
He got you.
His lawyer skills paid off. I would tell you, this has been a journey. Man, I don't know if I can put it in words of the things that I'm learning and the things I'm doing. I jokingly said to you, I'm having to pick out what size nails that's going to go into the 2x4s. Like, we're picking out locations. We're talking about staff, apparel, the decor of the banking center. What do we want it to look like, feel like? What's the music in the background we want to have? What's the products we want? How do we want to frame the bank? Like, how we want it to be perceived by the community? How are we listening to the community? How are we going to get proximate? How are we going to stay committed? I mean, you name it, we're doing it. We're talking about it. I said to you today, my day started out looking at real estate. From real estate, now I'm here talking to you. From here, I go to speaking with some attorneys about some contracts that we need to sign with some vendors. From there, I go back to talking about our capital raise. When you think about the ebbs and flow of that day, I'm constantly changing hats and putting them on. But you know what, Angela? I love it. I go home now tired every day, but it's a good tired. I welcome the opportunity. I don't think I've been this motivated in 30 years of my career. Now, I've had some great times in my career, don't get me wrong. But this right here, if this is my last hurrah, man, you better bet your bottom dollar I'm giving it all I got. Every day, Monday through Sunday, I'm giving it all I got.
Clearly a passion project and a legacy that you will leave in this community. And I just want to thank you for it. I want to thank you for stepping out of your comfort zone as the banker to become the real estate person and the contract person and the interior designer and all the things. It's no question to me that it will show the passion that has gone into it when it's actually up and running. It is going to be an amazing resource for our community. And I just, on behalf of the community, just want to thank you for taking it on and bringing it to fruition, because we will, as a community, be better for it. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask you, you said you came from Georgia. You've been in Indiana for quite a while, like I have. Indiana's home now. I want you to give us your thoughts around some of your best advice. You gave us some really great nuggets earlier, but hopefully you can give us a little more on what you think our corporate leaders can do to continue to recruit and retain diverse talent in our city with all the things that are going on, including your bank and all the sports events and the new Indy Ignite and the WNBA All-Stars and all the things that we have that are actually drawing folks to Indianapolis for the first time ever. There's a great opportunity to allow people who are very talented and have the passion like you and I do, who want to find a place to call home and really make an impact, to stay. So what can our corporate leaders and community leaders do to continue to positively influence those that come here to stay here and to build here and to continue establishing a legacy that you and I hope to establish when our tenure is done?
I would say first, again, I go back to be honest about the culture that you represent within your firm. Have a true, realistic view of what your culture is versus what you think it may be. Get out, talk to your employees, and ask them, get proximate with your team first if you're trying to recruit to your company. Second, I would say get proximate with the community. Get out. One of the things I've always done is I get out and I talk to the people in the community. Even with this transition, taking on this amazing opportunity, one of the first things I wrote down on my list to do is get out, talk to folks in the community, and ask them, what do you want from a bank? What do you expect from a banker? Now, yeah, I got 30 years of experience, but it didn't stop me from getting out and talking to the folks in the community. I say that because when outside talent come to Indianapolis and they ask you, which has often been asked to me, what does Indiana have to offer me? You can't answer that question, my dear leaders, if you're not connected to the community. You need to get out and get proximate with the community. And I've learned to also just share my story. I share my story. I get out and I support the local organizations that Indianapolis has to offer. Part of my orientation to Indianapolis was Indiana Black Expo. And I tell Alice, my dear friend Alice Watson, this all the time. Indiana Black Expo helped me discover Black Indiana. I was like, wow, right? And so when I would go back home to Georgia, they're like, man, why aren't you coming back to the A? I know, man, I have my own A in Indianapolis. I have the Indiana Black Expo. Then I fell in love with the sports community. And then I start meeting different leaders like Jimmy McMillan, yourself. And I just started getting more and more proximate with the folks to help me shape my narrative of why Indiana is a great place to live. And it helped build that passion that hopefully is coming across today to you on why I love this place. Now, this is home for me, and which is why I'm so excited to be able to deliver a gift like Generations Community Bank back to this community that will help them for generations to come.
Al, your passion absolutely comes across. You represent so many of the same experiences that I have had in this community. I remember saying the same thing. It was going to a Circle City Classic luncheon that a friend of mine at Lilly invited me to as a volunteer. It was the first time I went to the Indiana Roof. It was the first time I had seen Black affluence, like a real middle, upper class Black community that was doing things representing every portion of business, community, industry, everything. It was the first time, again, I'm a country girl from Kentucky, so I get it. I'd never seen that. And the opportunity to be able to integrate in a community like that, to now be in the position to influence and impact, it is truly one of the privileges of my life. So I appreciate why you feel the way you do. We've had very similar experiences. And I just want to finally ask you, for those people who have yet to come to Indiana, who are still seeking new opportunities and new experiences, and Indianapolis or Indiana still isn't on their radar, given your experience, your professional experience, your personal experience here, what would you advise them to share? What would you share with them to recruit them to Indiana, tell them to give it a try because it may or may not be what they expect?
I would say if you're looking if you're a sports fan, you can't beat Indiana. You have the home of the Indy 500. You have a home of the Pacers, the champion Colts, and the Fever, Caitlin Clark and team. From a sports perspective, awesome, right? From a cleanliness of the city, I look at the small things. The cleanliness of the city. We're known to put on some of the best events. We've held a Super Bowl here. We've held the NBA playoffs here. Now we're about to have the WNBA All-Star Game here. And this city is phenomenal. It's best in class. Our restaurants are growing. We're getting more and more restaurants here. The communities around the city is growing, becoming more and more diverse. And we have some of the best companies. When you think about Lilly, Cummings, Old National Bank, Chase Bank, and the list go on and on and on. And then outside of that, it's just good people here in Indianapolis. That's what it comes down to. This is good people. I call this a big little country. There's great people in Indianapolis, and this has become home for me. So I would just say, I wouldn't challenge them to make Indianapolis their home. First, I want them to come visit and get bit by the bug like I did back in 1992. Specifically, come during the Classic. Come during IBE celebration so you can see how our community come to life.
I have so enjoyed this conversation. This has been a phenomenal kickoff to 2025. I thank you for sharing your time with us today. We are so excited for Generations Community Bank to open. We will be there to support you, and we thank you for everything you're doing to support our community. Thanks for being on the 42nd episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to Al London, and thanks to you for joining us on this 42nd episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Please come back next month for another conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Central Indiana business community.